Hello, everyone. Welcome this evening. My name is Adam Urinsky. I'm a partner at Architecture Research Office here in New York and a longtime friend of the League, someone who's benefited from their support over the years. I'm here to introduce Emre Arolat, who's going to be tonight's speaker, and welcome him on behalf of the Architecture League. And then I'll also be moderating questions and answers and discussion at the conclusion of the lecture. I want to thank Cooper Union and the Irwin S. Channon School of Architecture and Nadir Tirani and Elizabeth O'Donnell for hosting tonight's lecture, as well as other lectures in the current work series. And I thank Emre for sharing his work with us this evening. And I guess I copied something from the League's website, so I'll give a plug to the League as well, that I just want to note that and thank the League for all of its support for programs that, quote, nurture excellence in architecture, design, and urbanism, and stimulate thinking and debate about the critical design and building issues of our time. It's also personally gratifying to have this opportunity to come to know Emre and his work, and we just met yesterday evening, but I'm looking forward to the lecture myself. Emre's biography is on the League's website, but nonetheless, I'm going to recite the basics. He was born into a family of prominent Turkish architects. He joined his parents' firm after graduating from Istanbul's Mimar Sinan University. In 2004, he founded EAA, Emre Arolat Architecture, with Gonca Pasolar. Today, the firm has offices in London and New York, in addition to Istanbul. Its projects have received international recognition, including the Mies van der Rohe Award and the Aga Khan Award. Arolat has also lectured at design schools around the world, and he was the Norman R. Foster Visiting Professor at the Yale School of Architecture this past fall. In 2012, he co-curated the first Istanbul Design Biennale, and his work has been widely published and exhibited, including at the 2012 and 2016 Venice Biennales. Emre's architecture spans a diverse range of project types and sites, and I think you'll see that tonight, including rural and urban contexts, as well as engaging private and public programs at all scales. Many projects involve the adaptive reuse of existing structures. The quality of the work, moreover, the timeless qualities of the work, its directness, material integrity, and spatial intensity are notable. EAA's projects are both fundamentally grounded in and transformational of the places in which they're located. The firm is an example of what one could call a global practice, simultaneously rooted in place and encompassing a much broader purview far beyond the boundaries of a specific site or project. In this respect, I would be remiss if I did not highlight that Emre comes to us from Istanbul, which has been a local city for centuries. For architects, Istanbul is a magical, mysterious place where the accumulation of building fabric over millennia is evidence of the ebbs and flows of civilizations. Poised between East and West, Istanbul has taught us much and has much more to teach us about how culture evolves through the mixing and exchange of ideas, something we want to be especially mindful of these days. Richly layered, the historic city presaged the simultaneity and blurring of boundaries that distinguish life in the interconnected planet of our epoch. Emre's talk this evening, engagingly titled Scent of the Trace, will elaborate on how his work is shaped from the history and geography of context together with the demands of the present. Please join me in welcoming Emre Arolat.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for this introduction, Adam. Actually, it's my first year in New York as an established architect, and I'm honored to be here with all of you, and thank you all for inviting me. I feel very lucky to be here tonight with you, and I'll try to talk about the resources, reasons, and arguments of our architectural approach, together with our understanding of context. Okay, speaking about context, We all know that in societies which are under the influence of capitalism, glamorous, charming, and seductive sources are increasing rapidly, and nowadays the object of desire is everywhere. And this is the climate of all that is solid melts in the air, as Marshall Berman stated ingeniously. And no matter in which geography, sparkling, flashy and dashy icons and high-rises emerge as the new symbols of the cities. I believe that it won't be wrong to consider this situation as an epiphany of neocolonialism. And very briefly, I can say that those intentions are gaining a general acceptance day by day by the majority of the world, and a kind of neoliberal context is becoming essential. Okay, now I want to give you some brief information about my background, and by doing that, I'm aiming to give you a first impression also about Turkey's forming years. Then I'll try to forward you some clue about current sociological, political, urban, and architectural context in Turkey. As you may know, Istanbul was the capital city of Ottoman Empire during nearly 500 years, and Atatürk, who is the founder of Republic, decided to move governance center to the central part of Anatolia and assigned Ankara as the new capital in 1922. I can say that it was a quite critical decision because, as you can see, this new capital looked like a big village rather than a real city in those days. Yes, it was small, but on the other hand, it was the fortress of republicanism and one of the most distinctive symbols of Turkish westernization. And meanwhile, my parents, who are both architects, as Adam said, established their office in Ankara, and they were participating in architectural competitions in order to get a job. And they did it. After some attempts and various awards, finally they won the first prize in the competition of Zonguldak Hospital in 1963. I'm not sure, but it may be a sign I came to this earth right at the same time. After 7 years of hard work, they moved to Istanbul in 1986. And 68. It was, of course, a much more vibrant, dynamic, crowded city, also the financial capital of the country. At the same time, the amount of private sector's investments were increasing in all Turkey. A variety of projects were on board on Arolat's architectural office in Istanbul. And meanwhile, I was planning to become a professional car racer, but somehow I found myself in architectural school in Istanbul. And just after my graduation from University of Mimar Sinan, I came to US in 1986 and worked as a junior architect for about a year. I have to say that after an extremely pleasant and fruitful period in Georgetown, in M Street, once again I was in Istanbul and joined to my parents. It was the beginning of my 17 years of partnership with them. As a brief summary, I can say that Arolat Architects was my principal university, but within 17 years of struggle, I felt that I should graduate from there. And in 2004, we founded Emre Arolat Architecture together with my partner Gonca. It was the forming period of Turkey's last generation progress, and we had lots of work. Most of them were quite challenging, and we were becoming more and more sensitive about our way of doing architecture. And at that point, we were 6 architects in the office, and believe me, I was thinking that it was an ideal scale for an architectural practice. But I was totally wrong once again. Just after 4 years, we were more than 100. Even with this large group, we were always keen on conserving, let's say, our amateur spirit, and we tried so hard not to become a large-scale corporate office. Instead, potentials of public benefit and sensitivity about the context were always the main issues of our practice. I never believed in kind of architecture as an art of generating icons, I think that this situation charges the architect with a responsibility which is much more important and definitely more complicated than being a kind of unconcerned producer of image industry or a mediator of society of spectacle. Okay, in 2014, just after 10 years that we established EAA, although we were very busy and with some really large-scale projects in Istanbul, we opened a second office in London. It was just a kind of a step to Europe, but I have to confess that it's been an extremely challenging geography for us. Without any exaggeration, I can clearly say that maybe being Turkish or coming from Turkey is not the best specialty that you can have in Europe. Believe me, we had really hard times there. Finally, after years, we have some projects now, and we are dealing with a couple of them. They are mostly mid-scale and large-scale mixed-use, hotels, retails, and residentials for the moment. It's going well. Okay, since I'm kind of unskillful in taking lessons, we opened another office here in New York a couple of months ago. I can honestly say that the first and only complicated project of us in US for the moment is the renovation of our own office space located in Soho. And this is roughly the result. Of course, with some luck, but we are in the process of teaming up for the moment. We have just begun to work there. It's a peaceful place. I like it. Okay, I seem to hear the questions coming from the audience, from you. Yes, I can hear them clearly. What's my problem? Why I'm kind of comforting myself? What is the reason for me to strive with all of this while I have a busy and successful office in Istanbul? Why I'm turning myself into a newcomer here? You may be right, but anyway, I'll try to explain you why. Okay, now let me tell you a bit about the current socio-political climate in Turkey. The government of Erdogan has been in power since about 16 years, and to speak honestly, they made a big move during their first decade, and the country prospered very rapidly. And construction sectors somehow became the principal engine of the economy. Especially after 2005, every single day a brand new project came to the market, and without any holistic approach or any integrative master plan, without any general strategy, all the vacancies of the cities have been kind of subject of a delusion. And this was madly supported or even manipulated by the government. On the other hand, not only the Turkish ones, but celebrities from all over the world took part in this wish-wash advertisements of these jerry-built developments. I was terribly horrified when I saw Julio Iglesias standing over the model of cut-rate project, or even more, Jose Mourinho on the television speaking Turkish and saying that he wants to have an apartment in one of these ugliest housing developments in the world. Yes, it was a great boom, a fertile seasons of construction. But on the other hand, architectural sensitivity was not in the first place, or was not placed on the top. Instead, the real estate market was woozily living in a shallow and imitated heaven. Meanwhile, as a popular phenomenon, the simulacre replaced the sense of reality, and people were mesmerized by brand new but old-looking palaces along Ekiti and Pseudo-Bosphorus. Another mixed-use project, as an example, in Istanbul, named Venezia Istanbul. Not only a mixed use, but a kind of mixture, a mixture of mind, a kind of madness. I'm sure that you realize the good old San Marco Campanile agonizing in the middle of these corrupt masses. What an imagination, what a simulacrum or even simulation. I don't know, but I'm sure that Jean Baudrillard was turning in his grave while they were building this freak of nature. And here is the biggest surprise. Look at this. No, they are not photoshopped. In this morbid or let's say creepy atmosphere, instead of Pepinos or Giovannis, This time Turkish gondoliers, Mahmut and Mustafa, they are making the residents' dreams come true. Okay, those two projects, I mean the fake Bosphorus and the fake Venezia, were offered to our office by their investors separately. They were quite large and the offers were generous. But I remember that I felt on the top of the world when I refused both of them without any other reason. And not only the private sector, but also the government is in this game. Moreover, our president is in the driving seat. This is 10 years old map showing the forest lands in Turkey. And here you see Istanbul in a close-up. Some of you may know the city. It's a metropolis with about 18 million people. And you can easily notice that the northern part is full of forests. And this is a map from 1985. The northern part is relatively empty, as you can see, but full of water reservoirs and the forests. And they serve like as the elixirs of the city. But somehow, about 5 years ago, two gigantic projects fell like a bombshell. First one is the third Bosphorus Bridge, and the second one is the third airport of Istanbul. You can easily say that they have joined their forces to destroy the ecological system. The third Bosphorus Bridge of the northern shore was completed last summer and opened to public pompously by our high state officials. And this one is a close-up to the airport area from 2010. And this is from 2014, 15, 16, and 17. It's still under construction. Our executives are very proud to say that when finished, with the capacity of 150 million passengers per year, it will be one of the largest in the world. At first sight, one can think that those projects are nothing but useful for the city. In one way, it's true. Who can assert that Istanbul doesn't need a new airport? But I like to show these pictures for your kind attention. And I believe that it's a sin. Once again, the airport project was offered to our office by high state officials. To make the long story short, it was supposed to be built at the southern part of Istanbul without causing any environmental distraction. We were thrilled about that and worked about 6 months for the preliminary design. And one night, yes, it was really midnight, the deputy minister came to the office with about 40 officials. He said that they were very happy about the design process, but there was a small new issue. Because of some short-range economical reasons, it was decided to change the location of the airport and to build the airport on the northern part. It was a short-time shock for me after 6 months, and I refused to do this. They continued with Grimshaw. Unfortunately, environmental issues, or let's say shoddiness of the new developments, are not the worst destruction of this geography in these days. Very sadly, just in a very short time, in the blinking of an eye, the country has turned away from rest and peace. It's a very long story. It's a very dreadful and horrible game. Between you and me, I believe that it's a global drama, and it's not valid in Turkey, only in Turkey, or in only Syria. So until now, in EAA, both in Istanbul and London, we were facing this situation just frontally. I'm not sure if you got some answers now, but from now on, we will be facing a similar kind of situation also here in New York. Even in this atmosphere, which is quite weird and uncanny, instead of being affirmative always, or let's say kind of current system's unworried agent, without questioning what's going on, we believe that a producing architect could take a critical position and undertake a more opponent role. Instead of being defined only as producing well-designed or good-looking buildings, we consider our practice as an activity about raising fresh ideas every time. So now you'll see a series of our projects very rapidly, as 2 or 3 seconds for each project. This slideshow is covering about 15 years of production in order to give you a very general idea about what we are doing now, and then I will present you some of them in a more detailed way as distinctive examples of our architectural approach and our position in the intellectual field. Yeah, we design at different scales in different countries, and we face various contexts. I believe that it's a huge responsibility for an architect. Actually, since I'm not a strong believer of globalism, especially in the field of architecture, I always pay a great attention to learn, to understand, to internalize distinctive characteristics of different cultures, say features, patterns, specific hallmarks of the societies, physical, historical, sociological, and of course political layers of the settlements. I believe that we can learn from people, from roots, traditions, from different cultures. We can learn from using sometimes dialectics, and of course some new techniques. Sometimes we can even learn from the wind, sun, or rain. It's an educational process of kind of depth analysis, an attempt to feel the scent of the trace. A book which consists of our architectural works was published by Rizzoli in New York nearly 5 years ago, and in this book, Philippe Jodidio and Suha Özkan were the editors. And after some long dialogues about our architectural approach, they named the book as Context and Plurality. And nowadays we are working on the new one, because it's been 5 years since this book was published. We have some new projects, and we are working on the new one. Okay, we're coming to the end. You can see the variety of the scale and the context as well. It takes too much time for us to learn, to understand, try to understand what's going on in this area, to understand the general situation for each project, what's behind, what we can see and what we can discover more in this geography. What are the expectations, general expectations, what are the political effects and everything. So it's a very challenging period of research, doing research without drawing or without sketching anything. I believe that this kind of research is very important in architectural field. So, okay. Today I'm going to present you 5 or let's say 5.5 projects as distinctive examples of our architectural approach. And let's begin now with another story of rejected client. I told you that we established EAA in 2004, and having been walked away from my parents' office, to say the truth, we were like really anxious about worklessness in these first days. And a businessman who I hardly knew called me just then and came to the office. He was willing to build a new textile factory in Edirne, a city at Bulgarian border, not very far from Istanbul. And since I was aware of the fact that factories in our geography did not care about environmental issues and workers' human rights, something like this, and I suppose that he was planning to construct one of those prison-like production plants. And I immediately rejected the job. He called once again after 2 weeks. This time he was more insistent and declared that he wants the best, the most environmental friendly, and most humanistic textile factory ever built. I think that this was the first time for a client to do this. And it was a kind of surprise for me, but I felt that I should accept the project for once, in fact still with lots of hesitations in my mind. As one of the main design decisions, we aim to contravene the common understanding of planning system. It was kind of like turning out the destiny of the building, and we got rid of the separation between 2 main functions by combining production and management, and the equality of space quality for, the quality for, let's say, both functions was one of our main design objectives. And meanwhile, We integrated green courtyards into the structure in order to get more daylight and fresh air. And moreover, as you can see, some playgrounds and recreational areas within the landscape. Not only the main facade, but all the surfaces are designed carefully in order to obtain a holistic quality. This attitude was kept on in all the parts of the building. Instead of conventional, dark and, let's say, depressed production halls, here they are comfortably spacious and well lit. And the courtyards and playgrounds are like natural parts of the complex, even though they are not common for this kind of buildings. Not only being used as recreational spaces during the breaks, these areas are turning to be some social connectors, let's say, or common grounds, which are stimulating the social relationships between the workers and the administrators. And the cafeteria space is this one, designed with very basic materials, but still a favorable place, and I know that workers like it very much. And with all those qualities, this project won the Aga Khan Award in 2010. Okay, now we are in Istanbul once again for a museum for contemporary art. This time you can see different faces of the city, a colorful, multicultural, crowded and chaotic one. Maybe just like New York City, it's not the official capital, but a kind of financial, social and art center of the country. You see the center. In the center, the Bosphorus, a waterway which separates Asia from Europe, and the Golden Horn, which is an inlet connected to the Bosphorus. And Central Istanbul is the name of the whole complex, which is an urban scale transformation project. And you see the location right at the end of the Golden Horn. It's a closer look. Red lines indicate the boundaries of the site. Okay, in this project we were responsible of the transformation of one of the city's oldest industrial fields on the Golden Horn to become an attractive university campus together with some museums and art spaces. Actually, it was the Ottoman Empire's first power plant and served the city from 1911 up until 1980s. And my first visit to the site was in 2005, and I have to say that I was truly fascinated with the aura of the place at my first glance. And we were supposed to develop a master plan concerning adaptive reuse of existing buildings and to design some new additions. It's a large-scale and quite complicated master plan, but today I'll present you a specific part, which is the Museum of Contemporary Arts. The bluish buildings, as you can see, were the existing ones, and we were supposed to restore them. And the orange ones were the foundations of two buildings which were pulled down years ago, and since we were not allowed to add any new structure there, we were supposed to somehow reconstruct those buildings to convert into a museum. Luckily, we reached the original blueprints together with some photographs and demolished buildings, and they were quite helpful, and we were able to explore all the constructional details, all the layers of those buildings. And we found out that the main exterior facades, which were like light skins covering the inner cores, were standing on this robust concrete basis on the ground floors of both buildings. And all the technical parts, I mean turbines, boilers, and the others, were located above those bases, and they were detached from the exterior skin. At that point, we were supposed to identify the vertebra of our design strategy. Of course, I can say that the easiest way was to reconstruct them in their original shapes, as they were never demolished, but we thought that this is not the best direction to go, and instead of this guaranteed way, we decided to work on an interpretation by abstracting the original masses. We worked on the fundamental shapes of both buildings in order to get some clue about the essence of this abstraction. And we try to execute a kind of a simplification and reach to the primal masses of two basic prismas. And the final product of this challenging process was a simple and kind of, let's say, impartial building, but still they were following the physical or, let's say, genetic traces of its ancestors. And still, once again, the skin is another part of the building, and here you see one more time the base part is the service levels of the museum, the core or the nucleus, let's say, as the primary spaces, exhibition halls and rest areas, and the perforated metal facade as a translucent skin. Here is the new building with the others. I believe that rather than a fancy or brand new look, as many newly designed museums have in the world, our aim was coming up with a kind of timeless appearance, embracing the industrial soul. But when the night comes, with the help of its translucent skin, the building almost transforms into a lantern, exhibiting in its site. This is a look from outside again, the grand stairs between the different levels of exhibition halls, and the opposite this time from inside to outside. Visitors have a visual contact with the neighborhood with the help of the light outside, and moving from one floor to another, they can experience the historical environment. This is the entrance area, and you see that it's a quite naked and exposed building with very few materials. I mean, instead of creating a kind of gorgeousness related to the materials or expensive-looking surfaces, we were keen on the fluidity and volumetric richness of the spaces. And the kind of visual continuity through the floors was an important issue in this project. And some large art pieces can be displayed in the space, which is in between the facade and the exhibition halls. Of course, the exhibition spaces are quite flexible, and there are many different ways for the exhibition designers to create their own stories inside. Coming back to exterior, this natural skin could sometimes serve as a screen. I like the potentials of the buildings when they can become a screen, a reflector, or a platform for some different purposes. And this is from a live audiovisual performance by an artist friend, Refik Anadol, and it was interacting ingeniously with the perception of the building as well. And it was about 10 years ago, in 2008. Refik improved himself astoundingly during this period of 10 years, and he opened an extremely interesting exhibition in a gallery that we designed in Istanbul lately. I know that it's a bit too far for you to go and visit, but I recommend you to watch its movies at least. Okay, we are in the same area, again in Golden Horn of Istanbul, for the next project, which is this time a cultural center, and our client this time is the municipality. Even though this kind of projects are not financially profitable for the office, I like to be involved in them because of their potentials in terms of public realm. This bay was once the recreational center of the city during the early days of Ottoman period, and has been turned into an industrial zone after 17th century. And since around 80s, with some urban decisions which caused a considerable gentrification there, it's becoming more and more a kind of cultural corridor. It's a bit discussable, but it's a long story. And here the yellow rounds indicate the previous projects, I mean the museum's land, and the red rectangles indicate the site of the cultural center. Actually, this site is on the intersection point of two regions, with different characteristics. One is the neighborhood at the back, which is the red one, which is on the higher level, and the other one is the green strip, which is a landfill area going along the seaside. And the green strip is a lively recreational area, and you can find a great variety of people during different times of the day. So accessibility and fluidity of public movement were again important issues for this project. And the other substantial data was 40-foot level difference between the neighborhood and the seashore. And at that point, a major question comes into the picture. Is it may be possible to create a kind of structural landscape component which will be connecting the two levels instead of, let's say, generating a conventional building. So maybe in a way, this was the main aim of the design, and the structure appeared as an autogeneous outcome within this objective. In this way, as you will see now, people could follow many possible routes on the shell to reach the green strip, or could stop at any level to chat, to mingle, or to enjoy the view of the sea. Yeah, this is kind of evolutionary thing. And this is the outcome. A structure which is hardly perceived from a distance, I believe. And the uniqueness of this form is not for the sake of creating a good-looking building in this project. Instead, the form here is a kind of result rather than an objective. And the structure is like the base of the existing texture behind. And not more than a landscape feature when you see it from above. Okay, on the ground floor, 1 and 2, I don't know if you can see them. It's a bit small, but there are two different multi-purpose halls. There's a restaurant and some shops and office. On the upper floor, one is the theater hall with its foyer, backstage, and management. Actually, those two floors are visually linked to each other once again with the help of gallery spaces. Again, the fluidity of spaces is one of the main targets of this planning strategy. And just a quick look at the section, you can see the close relationship of structure with the existing topography. Transparency of front facade was another objective in order to create a continuous visual contact between the visitor and the context. And while wandering around the ramp, the visitor can have a visual contact also with the inner spaces. It's again a naked building with minimum material. And I can say that this transparency works also from inside to outside. Again, the visual contact with the neighborhood is one of the main objectives. This is the main multipurpose hall, and the smaller one with partially transparent enclosure. Now we will go to the very southeast part of Turkey, Antakya or Antioch with its ancient name. Founded at the beginning at 4th century BS, it was the third largest city in the world during the early Roman period. I can say that it's a cradle of civilizations. A local entrepreneur wanted to build an hotel on his land, which is located at the northeast side of the town, near to famous St. Pierre Church, which is considered as one of the most important pilgrimage sites of Christianity. He made a deal with Hilton somehow and inaugurated the construction with his team according to his architect's project. They were planning to complete a 400-room hotel in about 2 years. But life was not that simple and that easy. Wherever they were excavating, they were encountering some archaeological remains. Everybody was in trouble in that time. The architect, the construction team, technical consultants from different disciplines. I have to say that including one of the most prominent teams of archaeologists. And they were all hoping to discover a kind of considerable empty space to build the hotel. But after 7 months of incredibly hard work, the team faced the reality. The 200,000 square foot land was full of ruins, and they were totally desperate. The owner of the land split it with his architects, blaming him for not being sensitive enough about what was happening, and he was somehow at last exit and feeling kind of helpless. And the first and maybe the more rational choice was covering all once again and forgetting about this story. And I believe that a normal investor would do this. The other one was not so clear for him. He would be waiting for a miracle. And this was the beginning of a long and challenging story for us, starting with an urgent call by a professor who was already in the team. And this picture is from 2010, my first visit to the site. I'm still going there. The scene was incredible. Tons of layers everywhere, traces of different buildings, a bunch of incredibly bright mosaics, a Roman bath, a giant-sized mosaic, as well as I know the biggest institute in the world, with beautiful colors and patterns, sometimes even with hundreds of figures. Yes, it's an important question and an arguable decision. Should an architect undertake this project, which may seem controversial at first? Or I don't know, but believe it or not, after a long site visit, which took like 2 full days, and some discussions with the archaeologist, I decided not to refuse this project and take up this challenge full of risk. Of course, the process was extremely difficult. It's still very difficult indeed. First of all, it was not possible to build a conventional building in this land. And in order to deal with this unique situation and with an aim of a very sensitive archaeological conservation, we were kind of set into a tough route of design and bureaucracy at the same time. I don't want to bother you by talking about the series of approvals, starting from local authorities, going up to the ministry, but I can say briefly that it was one of the most challenging professional experiences in all my life, in my architectural journey. Let's see quickly how we proceeded. The plot has a rectangular shape. It's about 100 to 200 meters. The first drills were something like that, before us, of course, 5 meter to 5 meter pits with 5 meter of depth. And the findings after the archaeological excavation. Nearly the whole site was covered with those ruins. But fortunately with some exceptions. Yes, something that was discovered during the process of design just saved our lives. This picture is from 1910, and you see the creek with yellow dotted line, I hope, yeah, coming from the mountain towards the city, and you see the site which is marked with orange color. And we discovered that the old river used to run through the site. It was quite obvious that its bed was changed and rerouted formerly in order to be aligned with the road. And apparently there were no findings along this old bed, and this fact was bringing a unique and priceless opportunity for the project. On the borders of the plot with no findings, and along the old river course, there was enough ground for construction elements. I mean, the main load-bearing structure, to be exact, about 24 meters deep pilotis, was designed to carry the huge roof, which will protect the ruins, at the same time accommodate an important part of the building program, which normally is located on the ground level, like ballroom, restaurants, spa, and even swimming pool at the gardens, and the gardens are located at the roof level. Coming to the rooms, they are to be stacked on 3 floors, just like containers. One important thing to mention, since I didn't want it, since it was not relevant to construct them with conventional methods, the rooms were to be constructed off-site and then brought and placed into their locations within the frame. And they are connected to each other with horizontal and detached connecting routes and bridges. It was like a kind of utopian fantasy for some of us, maybe even for me also, but it came true. Here you can see the rooms off-site, done in a factory near to the site, not very near indeed. It was an old factory, and they reshaped the factory for this specific issue. And it was a big challenge to take them in the routes of Antakya, which are not very relevant to do this. And you see how they put them to their place with some 3 millimeters of range. And yeah, these are some. You see the visual fluidity of the space, the inner space, the corridors and the bridges. You can see the lobby level above and the museum level below. The main lobby of the hotel at left, and the museum parkour below, with all the ruins. In addition to the lobby lounge and the gastronomic facilities that are located at the ground level, an open-air museum route was included to the program. And these are showing the relationships between public and private zones. The findings above, 66 columns of 66 drills with a diameter of 2.5 meters, which reach to the depth of almost 24 meters without any machinery, all human, and the typical room floor below. Located at lower levels, the public circulation of the museum is totally separated from the hotel. These are the museum paths. And the restoration works are going on, and for the ruins, of course, and will be carried on for years. And I like it, and even after the opening of the museum, and the hotel, it will be going on. And I believe that it's an incredible work, and that this will break down the taboos of archaeology in a way, which is like a kind of an untouchable discipline now, and help it to kind of amalgamate with the community. These are some recent photographs from the site. The main section with all layers, and the roof level with the meeting rooms, ballroom, spa, specialty restaurants, swimming pool and patio gardens as the interpretations of the traditional local courtyards, as you can see above. A view from this floor, and just a quick recap of what we tried to do. You see the ruins, the 66 columns, and the rooms coming from other side of the city. And this is the main road of museum. It's a kind of a reflection of the old river. And some recent views from the site. I can't believe in my eyes, but they are doing this. Okay, back to Istanbul now. A couple years ago, a foundation called Sancaklar got in touch with our office about a project for a new mosque. And to speak honestly, as a prejudgment, I thought they were looking for a replica of an Ottoman mosque. Because even, I mean, in Turkey, even today, when you design a new mosque, the first thing that you have to face is the figurative burdens of classical Ottoman mosque as a weird anachronism. I told them immediately that I'm not that kind of architect, and this first meeting was finished in a very bad way. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of Ottoman mosques and find them extremely beautiful. I adore their volumetric compositions, but today, I mean, after half a millennium, even though the construction techniques are totally renewed, I find this expectation quite pathetic. It's an issue that we face every day, and we are accustomed to see brand new replicas or even caricatures everywhere in the country. These are two examples of the latest part of the 20th century. The one on the left, a replica in Ankara with more reasonable proportions maybe, but combined with a supermarket. And the one on the right, which is in Mersin, rather than minarets, you can easily think that 6 rockets will start their engines soon. And here on the left, you see the original Selimiye Mosque from 16th century, one of the masterpieces of architect Sinan in Edirne. And on the right, a brand new Ataşehir Mosque built in 2010 in Istanbul as a clumsy replica of its original. And what a pity, the name of this mosque is Mimar Sinan. A few days later, the head of the foundation called once again. He was insisted and came to the office with this picture. They were willing to build the mosque there, and I was extremely impressed by the lake and the untouched aura of the valley. Additionally, he said that they were ready to give me a realm of freedom, and I accepted the project. In the beginning of the design process, as we always do, we went to the roots, to antiquity, in order to find a way of radicalization. And we saw that masjid simply means a place to prostrate and does not dictate any form. It has to be clean, and that's the only condition. So in a way, anywhere on the earth can be a masjid or a praying place. We discovered one more time that there is no formal definition for a mosque in Quran or in any other source. So instead of searching for new and extravagant forms, we tried to reach to the essence. This was the essence of ritual of praying. On the other hand, we realized that due to the intense pressure of global capitalism, Islamic architecture is passing through a very dangerous period. It's a danger of losing its virtue and its identity. I think a very good example of such contamination is Mecca, where the Kaaba is, the most sacred site in Islam. Over the years, Mecca has transformed from the center of the earth to the center of tourism, and nowadays it's a kind of prime real estate asset. Big construction companies build luxury homes and 7-star hotels, and I think that with this kind of intentions we cannot talk about modesty. Nobleness or humility, or let's say unpretentiousness, does not live here anymore. Take Sheikh Zayed Grand Mosque in Abu Dhabi as another example, one of the latest landmarks of Islamic architecture, which became famous for having the biggest carpet in the world or the most bombastic chandeliers. It's a place for diplomatic visits, a tourist attraction, a place to see and to be seen at. A platform for Facebook and Instagram also. Okay, let's go back to the subject now, the essence once again, with the mark of modesty, humbleness and humility. Sancaklar Mosque is located at the outskirts of Istanbul. It's an initial photo of the site. As you can see, it has a lovely view overlooking the lake and the wide-looking landscape. As an important decision, we put the form away in the beginning of design process as much as we could, and we aimed to discard all cultural burdens which could affect the purity of our consciousness. And in this respect, we try to suppress the architectural language as much as possible. Actually, it's not wrong to say that this mosque is trying to tackle with the formalistic attitudes of mosque architecture in Turkey. And how we did it? We thought we could play with the topography a little bit. And we placed the main space below, and with the help of a simple slit, we got natural light into the main hall. Now, while approaching the land, we almost see nothing than a courtyard enclosed by horizontal walls and a vertical mass, which is the minaret, and it signifies the place. This is the upper courtyard. The cascades, following the natural slopes, turn into stairs. From this lower level, you can find the entrances of the main hall, the ablution rooms, library, and the small tea corner. Once again, natural materials as local stone, timber, we use together with water. And like the old Islamic Ottoman complexes, this is a place for praying as well as gathering, a kind of outer meditation space. Of course, sometimes different users could enjoy the place, which I like. Entrances of the main hall and the ablution rooms, and finally we are inside. You see the minbar, mihrab, And the natural light washing the Qibla wall reflects all kind of colors during the day as the main decoration of the space. It's a wow letter from Mehmet Özçay, a very special calligrapher that we work together. One important thing, I mean, I don't know how important, but unlike the conventional mosques, here women can pray at the forefront. This was one of the most challenging issues of cogency process for us. Especially on Fridays, the mosque is full, and I'm very happy about the embracement of the community, which was an important issue for me. For good and all, I believe that this building opened a door slightly and turned at least a new and modest light on. Okay, this is the half project, is a teaser. We presented a new project last week. I believe that this one can use the same light that Sancaklar, the previous one turned on. It's a community center containing a mosque once again. And it is designed for a young man who lost his mother lately. And he wanted me to design this for her memory. Her name was Nora. Nora means light in Arabic. This is just in the middle of the Ajman, which is not a great place, but it's a very central area, lots of skyscrapers and everything, with lots of domestic buildings. And it was not possible to compete with them in a way if we do a building. Don't worry, this is only 1.5 minutes. Okay, coming to the end tonight, let me read you a quotation from the Quran. Even if I'm not an expert, I don't know lots of things about that, but this is my favorite one. Don't walk upon the earth bragging, you can never cleave the earth, nor can you reach up to the mountains. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Emre. I'm going to thank you for your presentation. Beautiful work, well presented. I'm going to moderate to get things going with a couple of questions, but I hope that people will step up to the microphones that we have here and and feel free to follow up on anything you saw. One of the things I wanted to ask you is, so we're about the same age, and roughly, I'm 1 year older than you, but...
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You don't look
Thanks. But I'm curious if you could speak a little bit more about the influences on you in terms of your education, or your, obviously your parents and participating in the firm, but what were the currents that were happening in Turkish education at the time you were a student, or maybe even before you went to college because you grew up in a family of architects? Who were you looking at, or what kind of formed the grounds of the approach that you have to architecture?
To say the truth, I'm not believing to all kind of architectural educations. Especially in Turkey, we have lots of problems about that. I had a very classical form of education in Mimar Sinan University. It's like the kind of Beaux-Arts of Istanbul. If you compare with Istanbul Technical University or Middle East Technical University, which are the other, let's say, powerful schools in Turkey, architectural schools in Turkey, it's more classical as an education. But it was more classical. Nowadays, everything in this educational field seems to be more flattened, and there's no big difference between the schools in Turkey. I was just in a point to lose all my, let's say, all my motivations about architectural schools until I came here to States and went to Yale last semester, and once again I believe that it can be in a way. So of course my parents were very important in my education. Since my childhood, I was always in their office doing some models and looking to the projects. I remember once that they were doing a competition project, and I asked some questions to my father, and I liked the model that they were doing as a toy, maybe in that age. I was 10 or 11, and I asked why those buildings, those were some pilotis in the buildings, and I said, why don't they have the ground floor? And he said, because we wanted the wind go to the other side of the land. And I said, okay, I think architecture is a serious business. So that was my first education, in my opinion, and I believe that it never finished. It's a continuing period in our lives, and I feel that I learn every day from everybody, and every moment. You don't know where the know-how will come from, and I believe that it's a process.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that quality that you talk about, the wind coming through and having that explained by your father, relates to maybe my next question, which is several of the projects that you showed are kind of infrastructure element, and we spoke last night a little bit about your reticence to immediately think of the project even as having a kind of architectural manifestation of the building as a kind of conventional object or form, and certainly the work that you showed today relates to that. And I'm curious, how do you engage in your design process in terms of thinking about some of the qualities that you're trying to frame through the development of your architecture? Obviously, some of them relate to site, but what techniques do you use in terms of your design process to both withhold the maybe immediate solution? You talk about hold that at arm's length, and you even talked yesterday when we met about not wanting to make something beautiful. That was a conscious decision you made. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, of course. I believe that in architecture very roughly we can split into two the methods of designing. I know that it's a kind of underestimating the process, but I will do that. One that is thinking with drawing, or thinking with sketching, thinking with modeling. And the other one is drawing or sketching or modeling what you think. These are two different processes, two different methods. In the first one, you can have kind of idea about what will you do, but your resource, your research, and the process, the first part of the process, is with the forms and is with you play with forms. You search for some new forms and sometimes for simplicity, sometimes for extravaganza. I don't know, but it's a kind of designing by drawing and by sketching. My belief is with the second one, which is before you draw or before you do anything, like architects do, you do something like not the architects do, like sociologists do, like researchers do, and then sometimes in our office, the first preliminary projects, let's say maybe 70% of the time, has been killed by us by doing some research and I'm searching for the elementary parts of the vertebra of the design. So in a way, after all, it's not a long shot for us to design, to make the design, or to draw the design, to draw whatever you want. But the first part, which is the resource part, the research part, and the let's say, it's not only going to the site, it's not only listening the whisper of the site, but it's a very broad sense. I mean, you research all the qualities, all the potentials. I mean, demographic-wise, physical-wise, climate-wise, ecologic-wise, and everything. And this is the biggest part of it. And in the office, we always do this. Some of our new colleagues are sometimes being surprised about the process, because I'm always telling them, okay, it's not the time of designing something, it's time to talk about that. So it was one of the biggest challenge doing architecture in my parents' office also, because they are coming from another school and then they were always designing. And whenever I talked, they were saying that you talk too much. So in a way, I mean, I believe in talkings, I believe in research, and of course sometimes, yesterday I told you that one of the experience of us was trying to get rid of the beauty of the buildings in a competition, for example, that we did in Istanbul maybe 8 years ago. It was a big moment for us to come to a point that we should not design a glamorous or good-looking building, and we tried to get rid of this beauty, and it was the most challenging part of our process. And I don't know if we could do this, but I mean, this is a building which is not looking like a building for the moment, but people like it. That was the point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting quality of I mean, several of the projects you presented are infrastructural. I mean, they're about enabling some type of function or use, and then their kind of quality as monuments, or their publicness comes out of kind of the scale, and but they're comprised of a repetition of elements that has a kind of neutrality, which then you play off against in the museum. The second project that you showed,
yeah.
The Museum of Contemporary Arts, building off the platform of the existing buildings. So, I mean, it's an interesting defining quality. And then the two later, actually, yeah, the 1.5 projects that you showed were in a way, very different, grounded, in the earth, literally, themselves. So, I guess I'm fascinated by, in very different ways, how the architecture sort of, I wouldn't say disappears, but is mediated, and through some other means, is not immediately object.
Thanks a lot for that.
Yeah. I don't know if there are any questions or anyone's show. Yeah, come on up.
Hi, thank you for this wonderful presentation. I'd like to ask something about the first part of your presentation. You showed this increase of construction and lack of respect to the environment in Istanbul, and all these replica projects that are being built. I'm curious because I also listened to one of your previous other conversations in Turkey, and you mentioned in one of them with all this increase of construction, there's a lot of work that's opened for architects. I'm curious if there's any positive side to this immense construction in Turkey related to quality of architecture rather than focusing on the negative part.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it was a huge field for architects of our time. It's very discussable about, I mean, if the architectural community responded this in a relevant way or not. I'm not sure about that, because it was a big potential and lots of offices from abroad, from Europe and States as well, came to Turkey for some different projects as well. But I think that our generation of architects was very lucky about that. But I'm not sure if we use this opportunity in a good way, because I don't believe that contemporary Turkish architecture has a kind of visible role in the whole society of architecture in the world. Of course, there are some names, but I mean, if you are talking about 80 million people country, I don't believe that we use this opportunity in a good way. I don't know if it's an answer to your question.
You mean in terms of educating the public about the potential that architecture has beyond simply fulfilling the program or creating iconic buildings? Or?
Believe me, I don't like this educating community things, but I mean, educating architects, maybe it's much more relevant. I don't think that, I mean, it was a big boom, and there were lots of potentials, but it's always easy to be an agent or to be a man of the client for the architects, and the majority of Turkish architectural groups did this, and this was the worst part of this process, in my opinion. But in a way, you can, I mean, as an architect, you have to take some risks, and then you have to force the conventional part of the field, and then you have to force to do something new, something fresh, and create some new, fresh ideas. And it was just the time to do this in Turkey, and I think this train has gone.
Thank you. I have a questions about. So throughout the whole conversations, a lot of projects you talk about the context in Turkey, but from the beginning, your introduction was guide us from Turkey to your office in New York and in London. So my question is that from the experience of understanding the context of Turkey, how did you learn that and apply into the context in London and New York? I mean, how can you start on over again in a different city?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, this is the biggest challenge in my life, and I like to be inside of this challenge, because whenever you do a project in a country, in a new context for you, as an architect, you have to learn everything about that, and it's a good educative period for yourself, to force yourself, and I like to do this. For example, now we are doing a project in Miami, 2 houses in Miami, and since about 2.5 months, I'm reading, maybe I read more than maybe 5,000 pages about the history of Miami, I mean, I did it because Of course, I gave this subject in Miami Beach in the Yale School of Architecture as well. For that reason, I had some knowledge about that. But since you have a new job, you do maybe more. And I like this process. Now we have some, I believe that we will have some projects in New York as well. This is the city that I would like to be in if I will not live in Istanbul. This is the city that I want to live. And it's a city that you have to learn in a deeper way. So it's a very deep city, and you have to go down, you have to go up, you have to go right and left, and to the history, to the future, and everything. So in a way, it's a very nice challenge, and I like to do this. And this is the way that I learn, and this is important.
Thank you for a beautiful talk. I have a question regarding the last 1.5 projects that you showed, which really attempt to rethink a typology that's surrounded by myths. For example, 2 months ago, The Guardian posted an article criticizing a new design for a mosque in Tehran that doesn't have a minaret. And that's largely due to the false belief that these elements are intrinsically Islamic, when really the minaret was a 13th century innovation due to purely functional reasons. So it seems that the mosque typology is really surrounded by this battle. And my question to you is, how much responsibility do you put on the architects to really educate the public that you really can rethink this without offending the religion itself? And the follow-up question is, what do you propose the best platform or method for going about that is?
First of all, I don't believe that we have to educate community as architects. This is not possible, in my opinion. You can only make some doors ajar, and people can see some lights inside, maybe. That's it. I mean, and I don't believe this kind of talks, educating people as architects. I believe that architects should educate themselves, learning from people every time. But coming to your question, of course, you have lots of responsibility when you design a religious building. Plus, if you are not a practicing religious person, as I am, it was a big responsibility, and I wanted 4 or 5 months time from the investor of the first mosque that I designed, without doing anything, but talking with some, let's say, some people who were having lots of experience in this field, some religious people, some architects, some friends, and I didn't design anything until that I feel that I can take this responsibility, because it's a huge one. But after all these conversations and everything, you think, and I mean, somehow you feel yourself educated and then good enough to do a design of mosque or hospital, I don't know. I remember my first project of an airport terminal. It was like a huge problem, because I mean, you can think that it's a very complicated one, but it was not. There is an exit and there is an entrance. That's it. I mean, an airport. Nothing more than this. So in a way, simplifying this process is the most important thing. But simplifying is a very challenging period. So, in my opinion, in your, I don't know if it's the answer of your question, but the platform that you have to choose is your, let's say, deep insight, is your own education as an architect and your own knowledge about everything. I believe to the education, in that sense, that architects should educate themselves every day.
Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for the presentation. That was fantastic, especially the animations I thought were very effective and kind of brought out the amount of time you take in bringing about these designs and the talking period that you referred to. I guess I want to ask you about this talking period or this research period, and I guess the space in between those. You've been doing work for a while now, but I wonder, how do you explain to your clients or to the people that you are due a project or an architectural solution, how do you explain to them that you're going to take 5 months, 6 months just to discuss with people, just to get to know the context in which you're working? And has this become, I'm sure this has become easier over time, potentially.
Yeah.
But if it has or if it hasn't, how were you able to do this initially when you first started this process of really slowly engaging and really trying to understand what you were working with?
Sometimes you can do it, sometimes you cannot. I mean, you can't convince a client who is in a big rush. In this case, if you feel yourself competitive enough for this specific project, for example, let's say, if now, in this very moment, if somebody asks a community center, let's say, in Ohio, I will be willing to have at least 2 months' time, make some research in Ohio. But if somebody wants for me to design a, let's say, high-rise in New York, I don't need this time, in my opinion, because I do this since maybe 10 years, by reading, by doing, by even sketching. So in a way, it depends on the client, it depends on the work, it depends on the time, but sometimes you feel yourself very uncomfortable when you begin to think about that. But the moment that you feel yourself more comfortable is the right time to begin to design. So I mean, you have to be, I don't know how to say it in English, but you have to have a kind of a prejudgment before that you decide to do this or not to do this. I mean, you have to guess if you are able to do this or not. So in a way, for example, after the first mosques, for the second one, the client of the second mosque saw Sancaklar Mosque, and he called me and he said that his mother passed away just a few weeks ago, and then he wanted me to design a mosque, and he didn't want to go to another architect, and it was very easy for me to understand him, because he was, I mean, I don't want to say he was educated, but he learned what we were thinking about Islamic architecture. So in a way, it was easier, and I didn't want any extra time from him. But if somebody will want somehow, I don't know, but somehow a church from me, I will stop. And I said, okay, please give me 6 months, and I will learn lots of things. And for a synagogue, maybe, yeah, maybe more than 6, I don't know. It's complicated.
Thank you, that's great.
You've expressed throughout your talk that you don't believe in globalism, and in light of that theme, I want to ask if being a Turkish architect and identifying as a Turkish architect is important to you, and by extension, is practicing and developing Turkish architecture, however you may define it, important to you?
I don't believe to the nations, first of all. I don't describe myself as a Turkish architect. I describe myself as an architect who was educated in Turkey and lived in Turkey for a while, and for a good while. So I believe to the geographies more than nationalities, for example. Lots of time I feel very close to Greek people, to people from Greece, more than I feel close to some people from Anatolia, from the central part of Turkey. Because, I mean, this is a matter of culture, this is a matter of geography, not a matter of nationality, in my opinion. So, coming to your question, I believe that I'm coming from a specific part of Turkey, which is the Marmara side, Aegean side, and Mediterranean side, more than the Anatolian side. So in a way, I have this kind of feeling in my heart, and I believe that it helps me a lot to find my way when I'm lost in some different contexts.
Around the world, we so often see archaeological sites with a fence around them. And you did just about the opposite with your wonderful development above the specimens of those wonderful pavings and what have you. Well, how is the archaeological community in Turkey, if not elsewhere, reacting to your incorporation of obviously totally architectural environment over the ancient?
Yeah. To say the truth, at the first stage, they were very much opposite to this project. And then they were like, I mean, even though we were cooperating with a group of archaeologists which were very well known in Turkey in this project from the beginning to the end, some groups of archaeologists were a bit opposite to this. But once they learned the project, they learned the aspects and they learned the conditions of the projects. I mean, I think now people, all the archaeological world in Turkey is very happy about this project, because if this project was not happening, nobody will see these ruins, because, I mean, they would cover it and forget it in one day. So in a way, this hotel, okay, if you ask me my preference, I would prefer to do just the museum, but not the hotel, okay? No problem in this issue. But if we will do a museum, it was a private land and it was not possible to do it with the client. So in a way, the client wanted to generate something from this land, but the museum will be belonging to the cultural municipality. So it's a kind of win-win game, in my opinion. And I believe this kind of negotiations in the communities. And as I told you in the lecture, I believe that this move can kind of amalgamate this discipline, which is very important, because it's a taboo in our days in Turkey, and it's kind of untouchable discipline, which I don't believe that it's true, because, I mean, if you don't touch, you can't learn. This is my motto. But you have to know how to touch. You don't distract it. You can only touch.
We're going to take one more question from you here.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I really love the idea of the constant learning as an architect. I have a question. Do you use architecture as a tool for the self-development, or do you use constant learning to develop like great architecture, or use both to be a responsible person? Because you're saying responsibility drives you.
Of course, both. It depends on the situation. Sometimes in some projects, you do the first, and some others you do the second. But I believe that it's a learning process, and it never stops. If you, I mean, I'm a kind of person which I think that we are all responsible about learning our context, learning what's going on, learning about politics and everything. And I believe that everything is linked to each other. We can't think architecture as an independent discipline, independent from archaeology, independent from, let's say, art. I don't believe that architecture is an art, it's another question. It's just a profession, in my opinion. Whenever you do a nice building, it can be a piece of art, but I mean, if you begin to architecture as an art, I don't believe that this will be a relevant or proper decision. But I believe that you have to learn and you have to be responsible about all of this kind of linkage, the togetherness of several disciplines. For example, in some projects you learn from sociologists, and in some others you learn from the firemen. I mean, it depends on the subject, but I like to learn.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you for teaching us, helping us learn.
Thank you.